welcome back to this week's video. Come along with us as we look for some shells. Started off in the morning, and the first thing I found on the beach was this penny. I actually found a few that day. I don't know why there were pennies on the beach. They must have washed up, but one of them actually was pretty old. Here's a little spiny jewel box. Here is a cut ribbed arc. This one had some orange coloring on the top there, which you don't see as often. Typically they're a bright white color. I picked up this stone. It really caught my eye because of how shiny it was and almost looked glittery in the sunlight. Right after it, I found another stone on the beach. Do you guys like to pick up stones as well when you go to the beach? I think I usually do, just because I don't typically see them. But comment down below what you guys like. Here is a worm snail. Here is a limpet. A giant bittersweet clam. Some of them have this more almost painted on look. Found a few oysters here, and I'm just showing you kind of the difference in what they can look like. This is a frond oyster, a purpley color usually. This one was even more purple. I'm not sure exactly what type of oyster shell that is. There's a lot of these on the beach that day. And another little spiny jewel box. This is an Atlantic strawberry cockle. I find a few of these every once in a while. I just think they're such a cute little shell, so I like to pick them up. I think this is a leafy jewel box. I know that someone commented before the difference between that and their other one, which is the corrugate. Sometimes I'm not always sure. It's a little clamshell, showing you there's a bunch of clamshells on the beach that day. This is a Pennsylvania lucine. And as far as I understood, I think on the southeast coast of Florida, they're not as common, but this summer I found a fair amount of them. Here was a piece of a shell that caught my eye just because of how bright orange it was. Maybe it was a thorny oyster at one point. A nice big chunk of coral sitting up on the beach. Wanted to pick it up and show you guys how pretty that almost flower-like pattern is. I love the big chunks of coral that I find. Another bittersweet clam. And I found a second penny on the beach. This one had more sand covered on it. Actually was a lot harder to try to get it off. When I find these shells, I wonder if they are a clamshell, but looking at my book, I saw maybe it was a favored Helen. If you guys know, comment down below. Here's something I do know. This is a spectral bittersweet clam. Oh, if I can get it back. That is a spectral bittersweet. I really like when they have that deep orange color on them. It's almost brown. And near it, I found this piece of sea glass. Sometimes it's not always sea glass because it's not super worn down, but I try to take it off just so that it doesn't cut anyone. Here was an actual piece of sea glass. This one was cool. It had some writing on it. A giant kitten's paw. Pretty bleached from the sun. On some parts of the beach, the pickings were pretty slim. Here's a very beat up scallop shell. A ton of clamshells that day. Here is a lady in waiting Venus clam. And here is a pretty big Atlantic bittersweet clam. Picked up an alternate tellin. Sometimes they can have almost this pink-like color coming from the top. I don't find a lot that are that size. That's actually pretty big for a tellin. Here is a tiny little scallop. And a spectral bittersweet clam. I was able to spot this chestnut turban up on the beach. It has some pretty nice deep browns on it. An itty bitty little mossy arc. With all these clamshells on the beach, it took a bit to dig through them. Sadly, that little moon snail was broken. Found a piece of something. And trying to see if there's anything good in here. Just keep going up the beach. Saw a piece of green, and it was this giant piece of sea glass. It was really, really nice. Hopefully I saved someone from stepping on it. This big oyster shell. A few of those on the beach that day. Don't usually pick them up, and definitely don't take them with me. I don't really care for them very much, but I wanted to show you guys what they looked like. Found this little scallop. These were pretty rough that day. It seems like they got messed up in the surf. There's this beautiful zebra arc. Had this deep chocolate brown color. I love the ones that have really dark stripes on them. Found a dark seraph. A lot of them had their spots worn down. They weren't as bumpy just because I definitely have been rolling around with all those clam shells. Here is another, I think, cut-ribbed arc, or maybe it's an eared arc. This is a shiny Atlantic auger. It's actually one of my favorite shells to find. I love how shiny they are, just like the name says. And I spotted this tiny little auger here. This is the common auger that we find, and actually we'll see me pick up a few of them this day, and that's because we have a little craft project going on at home. This is a crossbarred Venus. This was a special find of the day. I found a shark's tooth. If you can tell that it is one, the top of it was definitely broken, but I recognized the bottom part of the shark's tooth.
Everyone loves the Scotch bonnet.
And here is a Scotch bonnet, one of our favorite shells on the channel. This one, I want to say, is more so a stocky serif.
I know, I already picked it up.
And this might also be one, or it is one of those dark serifs. It's hard to tell between the two when looking at those next to each other. This auger was eaten by someone. But here is an example of a perfect auger. That one was a really nice size too. Another zebra arc. This one also had really nice stripes on it, the beautiful brown coloring. Had to dig through here, found a piece of coral. A beautiful false limpet. These don't have that hole in the middle, that's why they're the false limpets. But usually they're brown. They're not as pretty as that one. This is a common dove snail. This is a stocky serif. And another dove snail. Found a lot of these little shells. And another little shell to go with it was this tiny little auger. One of my favorite sounds is that of the shells. There was a bunch of little micro shells this day, and I still take time to appreciate them. Here is a checkered nearite. Not sure how I spotted that little guy in there. And another auger. And another dove snail. Here is a chestnut turban. Not as much of that chestnut color. Hopefully you're not sick of the augers yet. I know I'm not. I always love picking them up and taking them home with me. So in the last week or so we did have a storm, and this must be the aftermath. It was pretty incredible. These giant piles of shells, and couldn't go through all of them, but we did try to look. I found a Scotch bonnet. Got lucky with that. Lettered olive. It's one of the biggest pieces of a lettered olive I've seen. A little bit of orange sticking up out of the ground, and sadly it's a broken shell. It's a beautiful banded tulip though, which we really don't ever find any whole over here on our coast. I still wanted to appreciate how pretty those shells are, and hopefully I'll find one if I make my way over to the west coast soon. A couple more dove snail shells. Starting to get a little bored of those on this trip that day, but still wanted to pick them up. A giant Atlantic bittersweet clam. And a trusty auger. I could not believe how big this bittersweet clam was. I had to pick it up and show you guys in my hand how large it was. I mean, it was very beaten up, so I didn't want to keep it, but I had to show you. Here is a scallop and another little scallop. Like I mentioned, at home we're doing a little project with the augers. We're actually trying to fill up a bowl with them as decoration. So is it going to be whole? And sadly, no. It was broken. Broken moon snail. Here is a lettered olive. That one was actually pretty nice, so I wanted to pick it up and show you guys. The shells in these big shell piles were probably a few inches deep, and we really could not go through all of them. There were people sitting there trying to pick through the shells, but did our best just to give it a quick look, keep moving. Mossy arc. Looks like someone must have taken a bite out of it on the side. Couple of kitten paws. One had that bright orange color on it. The other one was definitely tumbling around for a while. Here is a calico scallop. The piece of a sand dollar. Find a lot of pieces of sand dollars, but no actually whole ones. Not here. Another little scallop. Nice shiny lettered olive. Do you guys like the lettered olives? I want to see some comments below if you're a lettered olive fan. Somehow I spotted this tiny little shell among all these other shells, and it is a coffee bean trivia. This is the Sally's auger. Only found a small one in a piece of this before, but this is the first whole one that I found. An Imperial Venus clam. A small one, but a cool shell. Spiny jewel box. This was interesting. Half of it was really nice, and then the second half of it looks like it was cut up by something. Found this beautiful yellow prickly cockle. They're not as prickly over here on the East Coast, but had that beautiful yellow color. And sad, this was a very broken lightning whelk. Did not survive the surf. And the final shell of the day was this beautiful shark eye moon snail. See you all next week.